okay, here we go. My follow-up to this was not only is the move from the 12 to the 13 very small, but generally speaking, the year-over-year updates from the iPhone are all pretty small. If you look at like the 11 Pro versus the 12 Pro or the 10 versus the 10S, they're all relatively small. The only big change I can think of that if you had the phone 12 months ago that you'd want to upgrade would be from the 7 to the 10. The 10 was so radically different.
Change.
That's when it made so much sense. But even, from the years before, from the 4S to the 5, the 5S to the 6, there were little changes, but objectively speaking, year over year, not a whole lot of reason to upgrade, but going back 2 generations, 3 generations, that was the case before. I think especially the case this year, that's where it makes so much sense to get one of these new iPhones.
Yeah, totally. That's always something we have to keep in mind is that Apple is selling phones for everyone, not just people who watch YouTube and are on Twitter. So it's like that sample size is so different. Yeah, like my parents, my mom has 11, my dad has a 10S Max. My sister has a 12 because she keeps breaking phones, so I told her to get on the upgrade program because it's just going to save her money in the long run. My wife has an 11 Pro, and she's my wife, for crying out loud. I keep trying to convince her, like, get the new phone, and she even just doesn't. Like, she likes technology even. Like, when the new stuff comes out, we watch the keynote together. She's like, oh, that's cool, that stuff. And then at the end of the day, she's like, well, I don't want to spend the money on it, though. So it's like, her yeah, go ahead.
So take that sample size. Who would you recommend of the people you just mentioned? Who would benefit from the upgrades from the 13? Who would you recommend and say, hey, the phone you've got, I'd get the 13?
Probably my dad, because he's on the 10S, and my dad is the one who always is taking pictures and videos of everything. Mm-hmm. So, and every time I'm visiting, he always like, give me your phone. I'm like, I mean, you could just get the new phone. Like, you're gainfully employed. You're doing pretty well. Like, you can get the new phone, because he always complains about like the certain things. I'm like, it's like first world issues, but it's just funny. Every time I'm there, he asks for my phone because it takes better photos. And it's not like he's asking me to take the pictures because I'm a better photographer than him. No, he's asking for the phone itself. So it's like, you could do that. You could do that on your own. So yeah, definitely him. Everyone else though, it's like, if they got the new phone, why? Like, what are they? The only other person I could think is my sister, because she's on the upgrade program, and I'm sure she's like 2 weeks away from breaking the phone that she has now. So it's like, that's really the only thing I could think. I even told my wife, like, do you want the new phone? She's like, no, not really. Because it's just like, it's like, will this phone make a difference in the way that you use the phone? For most people, I don't think so. Yeah. It's just not going to, especially like you said, if you're on one of these 10 series phones with this, I would call it new design, but it's not a new design at this point. The 10 has
modern.
been out for forever. Yeah, there you go. That's a better way to say it. Modern design. If you're on that kind of phone, like, if it's working for you, it's working for you. And the updates year over year are not going to be that different.
Yeah, same for me. I think that, like, my family members, if you have like a 6S Plus, it's time. If you have a 7 generation, it's time. My sister has a 10. I told her, like, you know what? Like, she uses her phone enough. Like, you'd probably notice a difference with the battery life and the processor improvements. For her, she just got an M1 iPad Pro, and she just said that the biggest difference for her was the Face ID speed. That, over time, the Face ID hardware hasn't changed so much, but the Face ID system has gotten faster. She didn't mention anything about the 120 hertz display. She didn't mention anything about processor. It was for her, it's like, oh my gosh, Face ID, it works better and it's faster. So that makes sense for her. And I said, it might be worth it. For my parents, 10S Max, it still takes really good photos and videos. My parents are much more casual phone enthusiasts. They love their big screens. So they've got, the 6.5-inch display. It's OLED. I mean, it's still a good phone. And for them, I'd say probably not worth the upgrade. And then my wife, I made the risky decision. She had an 8 that was just couldn't make it through the day. The battery life was horrible. She had an 8, was horrible.
She's been on the 8 forever.
It was bad. So a month ago, I want to say, or a month and a half, I got her a 12, knowing full well that was a horrible time to buy because the 13 was coming. But for me, it wasn't worth it to wait the extra month and a half and have her have to deal with that phone for the very minor improvements. And now looking back, I'm glad I did, because the 13 has nothing compared to the 12. A little bit of a bigger battery life, bigger battery for better battery life, processor maybe some slight differences to the camera, but she has now had that 12 for like a month and a half, and she's been very happy. So it really just kind of depends. Like you said, it's really about your usage and how much you use certain parts of the phone. And if you've got a modern iPhone that is still holding up really well, unless there's something specific, I don't think there's a huge reason to jump to the 13. There is nothing about that series of phone, coming from someone who loves Apple, that thinks it's like, oh my gosh, you've got to have this. Like, again, the iPhone 10, new design, Face ID, OLED display. That was like, oh man, you got to have this. This is the coolest thing ever. 13, it's better, it's refined, but nothing screams, you got to have this phone.
So that kind of leads to the question I have. Because, you know, if you look online on Twitter, which is not real life, but
the echo chamber,
everyone is saying, everyone is kind of saying the same thing. Like, this is a boring update. Apple didn't do much for this. My question every time people say that is, okay, what do you want to see then? What is the features that you want? And honestly, I don't know. I'd like a different design, sure, but like, is that really going to do anything for how I use my phone? No. What is something that you would like to see?
You know, this is a great point. I mean, there are things that I'd love to see on the iPhone 13 Pro that I wish they did. I wish that they did the always on display, and I wish that there were some other things that came true. But by the time this video, or this podcast rather, goes live, the video for the Apple Circle for iPhone launch day is, I'm not sure what we're going to title it, but my thesis is sort of like the truth about the iPhone 13. And as I was sort of writing that script and putting the pieces together, I kind of had this argument in mind about the echo chamber, about no one thinks it's a big update and it's small and this and that. And I think that the conversation we just had about iPhone longevity and the context of who's buying the phone, that's a huge piece to the puzzle. And as we were kind of talking about before we started the podcast, I think there are many people out there who are so quick to say, well, Android has this feature and that feature. My phone has a space zoom. My phone has an always on display, and Apple doesn't have that. And I will say, that's a valid point. Yes, the iPhone 13 Pro does not have features that Android phones have. And if you want the cutting edge, latest and greatest phone, like you want the most modern smartphone of 2021, as much as I love Apple and the iPhone, I don't think the 13 Pro is objectively the most cutting edge, bleeding edge phone you could buy. That's probably like a fold or a flip from Samsung. There are other Android phones that give you a much more unique experience. But that's just not the point of the 13. The buyer of the 13, the main buyer, is someone who's coming from one of these older phones that they're not looking at the year-over-year upgrades. They're looking at the upgrade from the phone they've got now, which is probably 3, 4, 5 generations old. And it's so easy to look at the 12 versus the 13 and be, oh, look, there's very minor upgrades. This is a garbage update. That's not the case for most people, and I think that's why we get so caught up with thinking the 13 sucks and it's a horrible phone. I think the truth is it the most cutting-edge phone that Apple has ever made, or is it the best Apple could have done? Probably not. There are other Android phones that are flashier, but is it the worst phone ever and not worthy of your money and just a cash grab experience from Apple? No, because it still offers a lot of value and has enough in there to make it a great phone for millions around the world. There's my rant synopsis of that video. And what are your thoughts on that, Matt? Do you agree, disagree?
No, I completely agree. I think where the well, what's the right word for this? Not the hate, but the kind of frustration with Apple, I think where that comes from is that people want the iPhone. It's not like they want all the different phones, because they obviously know like the Samsung Fold exists, or the Z Flip, which is the same price as the 13 Pro. So they know those exist, but they don't want those phones. They want an iPhone. They just want Apple to do those kind of cool things with the iPhone. And I totally understand that, because like I said, I love the camera system. It's the main reason I use the iPhone, even though technically specs wise, like the Samsung S21 Ultra has much better specs with the camera. I don't care, because I like the photos that come off the iPhone. And then extend that to the software. iMessage, I know it's the old trope, but I've tried to get off of it. It just doesn't, it's not working. Okay. My family is not getting off iMessage. I'm not going to Facebook Messenger. I can tell you that. WhatsApp, I hate. Telegram, we use it for work, but I would never use it on my own. iMessage is just where all the people I know are at. My wife is not going to switch to an Android phone full time. She tries them out every once in a while because I have them laying around, but she's not going to switch to that. Those kind of things. And then just the general software experience of different apps. You know, you get an update for Instagram, for instance, and it comes to the iPhone first. Like all those kind of little things that really go into having an iPhone. I think that's why people are frustrated. They want that experience, but they also want the cool folding phone, or they want the crazy space zoom. So I totally get why. At least that's my theory. At least, so if that is true, I totally get why people would be frustrated. And at times, I wish there was cool things. Like I pick up the Galaxy Fold 2 or 3 at this point, and man, it's a cool phone. It is just fun to use. I wish it was running iOS because Samsung software, I just don't like it. Mm-hmm. So it's like I totally get it, but it is what it is. There's really no solution to it. It's just you kind of have to deal with it. Hey, you made it to the end of this Apple Circle podcast clip, but there is a full episode. So if you want to listen to that, click the video over here. You can watch the entire thing. Or if you're someone who just wants to listen in your headphones, we have the audio version. Of course, links for that where you can subscribe and listen in your favorite audio podcast player is down below. And last but not least, the Apple Circle channel, where we have mini videos covering everything Apple, is also linked down below. So be sure to check that out and get subscribed.